Griffin always had something to say. Even 31,000 feet above the Atlantic, even flying to bury our father, even when the cabin lights dimmed and the air pressure shifted, he still found time to smirk. "You're just a passenger now," he said, not looking up from his wine. I didn't answer. Because when someone already decided what you are, words don't change anything. But action rewrites definitions. I kept my gaze forward, not at him, at the window, at the shifting blue, deep and endless. And then the intercom cracked. "This is the flight deck. Requesting Ironhawk. Repeat, Ironhawk, please report to the cockpit." It cut through the white noise like a blade. Conversations dropped. A baby's cry halted mid-breath. Even the hum of the engines felt quieter. Griffin's lips parted. "What the hell was that?" he said, half laughing. But I was already reaching for my belt. I stood, not to answer him, not to prove anything, but because when a plane calls Ironhawk, it means one thing: there's no one else left to fly it. Stay until the end. Because someone leaked my classified military file, the one sealed after the Baltic blackout. Because someone wanted the world to forget what I did. And because someone on this plane would only survive. Because I didn't. You'll hear what happened at 41 minutes past the hour. You'll learn who tried to erase my name from the records. And you'll see why in the end, it wasn't revenge I brought back. It was control. So if you want the truth, don't blink. Not once. Griffin always booked the flights. Always with intention. He chose Lisbon to Chicago with a long-haul carrier he trusted. Business class for himself and our mother. An aisle seat for me, row 9, Charlie, 2 rows behind alone. It was our father's funeral, but no one said the word. Griffin didn't mention Dad in the email. Just logistics. Just an attachment labeled Final Itinerary. No subject line, no emotion. I showed up anyway. He greeted me at the gate with a nod, not a hug. I wore black slacks, leather boots, and the same slate gray jacket from my Air Force days. No insignia, no name, just structure. Griffin raised an eyebrow. "No uniform this time," I said nothing. We boarded in silence. He walked ahead with his AirPods in. I sat down in 9 Charlie and buckled in, while he was already sipping sparkling water 3 rows forward. 15 minutes after takeoff, he turned back. Not his head, just his voice. Loud enough to reach across the cabin. "You always preferred being alone," he said. "Guess that's still true." I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my side bag, pulled out a black moleskin notebook, and slid it open over my tray. Entry 47. Term recorded, passenger. Source Griffin. No context, no rebuttal, just observation. He turned in his seat to glance back. Saw the notebook. Smirked. "You still keeping score?" I kept writing. Log entry 48. Cruising altitude 31,000 feet. Cabin temperature controlled. Cabin pressure familial tension uncontained. He took that as an opening. "You know, if you hadn't walked out of Dad's firm, you'd be partner by now. Probably running estate litigation, not flying. Whatever it is you fly." I didn't flinch. Because I remembered exactly what I'd flown. 6 different aircraft, 3 combat theaters, 48 classified ops, and the time he called me reckless for choosing service over suits. He never understood what control looked like in the cockpit, how it came down to micro-adjustments, to knowing what was about to break before it did, to recognizing a single shutter in the pressure seals before the crew even noticed. Griffin's world was built on statute and posture. Mine was built on feedback and instinct. I looked at him just once. He was polishing his glasses with the corner of his cashmere sweater, as if the clouds outside the window were the dirt that needed to be scrubbed out of the sky. Then, I felt it. A hum shift. Something subtle but real, a pitch imbalance in the rear thrust. The kind of thing you only feel when your body has been trained to hear danger before it speaks. I closed the notebook, straightened my posture, and waited. Because you don't chase problems at 31,000 feet. You listen. And when the moment comes, you move. It began with vibration. Not the obvious kind. Not the kind that sets off alarms or overhead lights. It was quieter, deeper. A discord beneath the cabin hum. Something only someone who'd flown tankers over the Mediterranean at night would recognize. something that didn't yet have a name, but had a consequence. I didn't react outwardly, just pressed my heel deeper into the floorboard, waited, felt the rhythm. Then it came again, a soft drop in pitch too subtle for the average passenger. But the airflow beneath the fuselage had shifted. That meant engine imbalance, likely the right side. Maybe a fuel irregularity, or worse, compressor stall. I looked at Griffin. He was flipping through an email on his phone lips, moving rehearsing a eulogy he hadn't written. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't care to. Row 9 still smelled like citrus disinfectant and warm plastic. The woman beside me was asleep, her Kindle open in her lap. And then confirmation. The tone changed. The hum dropped out entirely for 3 seconds. No announcement, no ding, no oxygen masks. But I knew. I undid my belt, stood, walked calmly toward the galley. A flight attendant turned to intercept. "Restrooms the other way, ma'am." I didn't blink, just whispered, "There's something wrong with engine 2. She paused, studied my face. "What makes you say that? Because it just failed." Her pupils dilated. Training kicked in. She stepped aside without another word. I moved past her toward the cockpit. Another attendant was already knocking on the door. There was no answer. 2 knocks, 3 seconds. A code was typed. The reinforced door slid open. Inside, the co-pilot was slumped forward, still breathing. The captain had his headset off, eyes wide. He turned when he saw me, and I saw the moment recognition struck. "Elena Hawthorne," he said. From Red Sector Bravo, I nodded once. "Ironhawk," another nod. "Thank God." He stood, not fully just enough for me to slip into the left seat. I scanned the panel. Engine 2 0 thrust. Engine 1 overcompensating at 134%. Pressure climbing fast. Risk of overheat within 6 minutes. Autopilot was still engaged. I reached for the switch. He caught my hand, then stopped. "You're sure if we don't handfly, we lose her in 10 minutes? He looked into my eyes. Just once. Then he nodded. I disengaged autopilot. The plane bucked softly, as if exhaling. I took the yoke. The yoke was colder than I remembered. Not just metal cold, memory cold. Like touching the hand of someone you used to trust. My fingers wrapped around it anyway. Reflex, familiar, automatic. The first thing I did wasn't correction. It was stillness. I listened to the air. You learn in combat flight that air speaks before metal breaks. The way it bends around the frame. The way it slips under your seatbelt. The way the rudder wants to drift even when it shouldn't. This one whispered heavy right drift. Trim lag. She was favoring her wounded side. I adjusted gently. "No sudden moves," I said out loud, not to the co-pilot, but to the plane itself. He nodded anyway. Silent. Observing. I toggled auxiliary airflow, cut bleed air from engine 2, rerouted hydraulic control to secondary. The systems fought back for half a second, then obeyed. The yoke softened in my hand. Good girl, I thought. This wasn't the first time she'd flown wounded. My logbook back home still had the entry. Flight CRX 107. Date classified. Condition asymmetric power loss over ice channel. Result survival. We weren't just flying this aircraft. We were remembering it together. The captain was watching me. "You're not listed in the manifest," he said quietly. "I wasn't supposed to be." He frowned. "They removed your credentials from the central list." I know why I didn't answer. Because I still didn't know who had done it. Only that it had been deliberate. That someone in a position of power had buried my name after Operation Hollow Wind. That even my clearance, my logs, my final flight status, all were flagged as incomplete. I'd stopped asking, stopped trying to prove myself. But this cockpit, it didn't care about rumors. It only cared if you could keep it in the sky. Outside, the light shifted. Cloud layers thinned. A shaft of amber sun struck the panel, glinting off the scratched edge of the throttle. That scratch. I knew it. This was the same aircraft I flew in training rotation Bravo 4. The yoke remembered me, and I remembered how to fly her. I checked the horizon line, adjusted for crosswinds, stabilized at 3,700 feet, then leaned forward. "Tell them I'm in control," I said. The captain hesitated. "Are you? I'm not asking." He picked up the headset. His voice shook just once as he keyed the intercom. "This is your captain speaking. Please remain calm. We are experiencing a minor technical issue. Control has been transferred to qualified hands." He looked at me. I didn't blink. I wrote one word in the notebook balanced against my knee. "Log number 50, status command. We cleared cloud cover at 30,000 feet." The sky stretched open, blinding oceanic. But inside the cockpit, something tightened. Not a bolt. Not a system. Me. Because something was wrong with the silence. It wasn't relief. It was the kind of quiet that knows what's coming next. 3 minutes after stabilizing thrust, the comms flickered. Just once. A short, high-frequency buzz. Then, nothing. I checked the audio input. The captain tapped the console. No failure indicators. No alerts. Then a voice. Not from the main feed. From the backup line. Encrypted. Distorted. But I knew the sound. "Iron Hawk. Do not engage secondary nav. Do not trust internal routing. You are compromised." The co-pilot sat bolt upright. The captain blinked. "What was that?" I didn't speak. Because if someone had access to the encrypted channel, they weren't just inside the system. They were inside the manifest. They knew I was on board. And that changed everything. I muted the channel, rechecked auxiliary power, then pulled up the internal flight path. What I saw made my breath stop. The aircraft was being slowly, almost imperceptibly diverted. Not enough to trigger alarm, but enough that our estimated landing would fall into airspace. I recognized one used for remote drone routing and black box override testing. I'd flown that corridor once, during a classified test of military AI coordination, and no civilian aircraft should ever pass through it, unless someone wanted it to disappear. I turned to the captain. "We've been rerouted." He frowned. "No ATC alert. They wouldn't have one. This is internal, buried in the secondary nav stream." His lips parted, but he didn't argue, because my tone didn't invite it. "What's in that airspace?" I stared ahead. Nothing. Which of course was the problem. He leaned forward. "Do we alert passengers?" "Not yet." "Then what do we do?" I reached down, flipped a tiny red switch beneath the console, one reserved for flight test override. The yoke shuddered, then unlocked with a soft mechanical sigh. Manual mode. Pure. I took control. 4 seconds, I said aloud. Of what I didn't answer. Because I was remembering something my instructor once said years ago when I froze during night ops. The brain shuts down at high stress, but command lives in the 4 seconds between silence and chaos. I focused. 1 second, right hand steady. 2 seconds, rudder trim adjusted. 3 seconds, pitch reset. 4 seconds, breath in. And then I moved. A soft vector correction, just 5 degrees east. Enough to break the hidden arc. Enough to reroute without triggering counter-response. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I just flew. The first scream came from row 11. A sharp gasp. Then the rising panic of oxygen masks dropping without warning. The plane jolted not violently, but enough. Enough to wake the sleeping. Enough to spill the drink in Griffin's lap. I kept the aircraft steady. But turbulence wasn't what shook them. It was the intercom. The captain's voice cracked, then steadied passengers. "This is your flight crew. We are experiencing navigational irregularities. Control is being handled by a senior aviator with extensive combat flight credentials. Please remain calm. No name. No rank." But it didn't matter. Because the cabin turned. Dozens of heads, row after row. All eyes fell on the woman in the slate-gray jacket, stepping out of the cockpit headset still around her neck. I didn't look at them. I looked at Griffin. He stood up, his mouth opened. "You're flying the damn plane." I didn't nod. Didn't confirm. I just stared. And that silence. That silence held more truth than every family dinner we'd ever faked. He shook his head, disbelief curling into disdain. "You're not even on the manifest. You're not cleared." A voice interrupted, this time from a woman in the forward cabin. "Ma'am, are we safe?" I turned toward her. She was older, pale. Her hands clutched the seat in front like a lifeline. I stepped closer, spoke clearly. "We're off route, but we're not lost. I have control, and I won't let go." Her eyes didn't blink. She nodded once, slow, solemn, then sat down. Others followed, not because they understood, but because something in my tone said, "This is not your decision now." That's what command is. Not shouting, just certainty. I moved back toward the cockpit, but paused beside Griffin, close enough for only him to hear. "You called me a passenger." His jaw clenched. I leaned just slightly. "You were right." A pause. "But passengers don't hold altitude when one engine's dead and the system's been hijacked." His breath hitched. Just for a second. I turned away. No drama, no declaration, only flight, only motion. Back inside the cockpit, the captain handed me a folded note, a printed page, thin, crumpled at the edges, pulled from the dispatch manifest. I recognized the font. Top clearance code. It read Hawthorne listed as liability. Override if active. Stamped. Dated. Sealed from 2 months ago. Someone had planned this. Not a crash. An erasure. I stared at the paper, then burned it against the heat vent. Because whatever they'd tried to do, they failed the second I took the yoke. The document wasn't fake. It bore the seal of Strategic Air Command, signed by a name I hadn't heard in years. Colonel Victor Ames, my former commanding officer. He was the one who briefed me before Operation Hollow Wind, the one who shook my hand after the debriefing and said you did what no one else could. The same man who vanished from every record 6 weeks later. Now his name sat in ink above the words, "Override if active." He hadn't disappeared. He'd buried me. I didn't speak, didn't tell the captain, just folded the paper again and slid it under my thigh. We still had 90 minutes of fuel, 2 flight corridors left to cross, and the moment I said his name out loud, someone would be listening. So I worked, silent, adjusted for westbound tailwinds, rerouted from Military Corridor 5 to Civilian Echo 9. Each command entered manually, each deviation covered by a valid protocol. They trained me for this. And they forgot. At 41 minutes past the hour, the comms flared again. Same encrypted voice. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was an instruction. "Ironhawk, you are off path. Comply. Comply or consequence." I exhaled once, then pressed the intercom. "Cabin crew, prepare for turbulence. And shut off all external communications now." I repeat, cut satellite links. The captain glanced at me. "That voice, was it military?" I nodded. "But not from this aircraft." His eyes widened. "They're trying to spoof you. They're trying to finish what they started." He paused. "Should we report it?" I met his eyes. "Not yet. Because if I did, the report would go to the same command chain that signed my override. And Trust had altitude limits. At 28,000 feet, I took her lower. Cut speed. Flattened our profile. Less signal, less exposure. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a second notebook. The red one. The one I kept after Hollow Wind. The one I swore I'd never write in again. First page. Entry 1 name. Victor Ames. Status. Incomplete. Threat. Ongoing. I stared at the page. Then wrote one more line, countermeasure still airborne. Because that was the truth. I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't erased. I was in the air. And as long as I was, the system hadn't won. We crossed into Illinois airspace at 13,000 feet. The sky burned low amber, slanting across cloud edges like stained glass. I kept the descent shallow, clean, predictable. No alarms, no sudden shifts. By now, the passengers were quiet. Still tense, but breathing. That's what real fear does. It doesn't scream, it listens. The captain leaned toward me. "Final vector to O'Hare received. Do not engage auto. You want full manual all the way." I nodded. He didn't argue. We came in low over Lake Michigan. The water caught the sun in fractured shards, and the runway shimmered ahead like something remembered in a dream. The first wheel touched at 143 knots. No bounce, no slide. Main gear down. Reverse thrusters engaged. Full stop in 17 seconds. Silence. Then the cabin erupted, not in cheers, in breath, in the sound of restraint releasing, in disbelief turning back into life. I sat back. Only then did I realize how still my hands were. The captain looked at me. "You know what comes next," he said. "Debrief. And they'll ask how I got into the cockpit, who authorized me." He nodded slowly, then smiled. "Good. Let them ask." I stood, opened the door, and walked back down the aisle, not as a pilot, not even as Ironhawk, just as myself. Griffin stood near the exit, face pale, phone still in hand, as if recording something he couldn't explain. "You were going to let us die," he said, not a question. I paused beside him. "No," I replied. "You were going to let me disappear." He swallowed hard. I stepped past him. Outside, 2 TSA agents were waiting, and behind them, a woman in a dark blue suit holding a clipboard. She raised one eyebrow. "Elena Hawthorne?" I stopped. "Depends on who's asking." She smiled genuine. "Director Wells, Civil Aviation Oversight." "We've been expecting you." I tilted my head. "Why?" She handed me a sealed folder. Thick, government stock, red tab, inside classified printouts, incident reports, and a note handwritten on top. "We never believed you were gone. Welcome back." I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just stepped into the terminal and left the manifest behind. I didn't return to the skies after that, not out of fear, but because some flights aren't meant to repeat. They're meant to be the last page of a logbook no one else gets to read. I never spoke to Griffin again. He stopped calling. I stopped waiting. Some wounds don't scar the skin, they live in silence. But that silence, it's where control begins. The press spun their version, civil reports redacted. But those who mattered, they knew, not from headlines. From the way passengers walked off that plane with new eyes. From the way one student weeks later sent me a letter, "I changed my major. I want to fly like you. Not because you saved us, but because you didn't need to say a word to do it." That's legacy, not medals, not clearance codes. Just a yoke, a moment, and 4 seconds where you choose not to let go. I'm no longer Ironhawk. I'm the ghost in the flight path, the hand in the logbook margin. And if someone someday finds themselves erased, they'll know they weren't the first. And they won't be alone.